struggles they're having is basically people who are protesting around mining companies, against mining companies, because he has like also private contacts like that. So he's wondering what would be the best approach for that, like to monitor those activists and check that they're not disrupting business, basically.
He knows already who are the leaders, or he wants to find out.
It was at that moment that our undercover reporter and ourselves, when we saw the footage later, jaw dropped to the floor. I'm going to tell you about how digging through the deep web led me to a data set that became my entire life for a year. This story starts in the spring of 2024. I'm looking on the internet, on the deep web, and I come across a big data set. It's 1.5 million rows. I'm looking at it and I see coordinates, longitude, latitude coordinates, geographic coordinates. I see phone numbers and I see hundreds of columns. It's on almost like a spreadsheet structure. I found this data set because I was looking into the activities of a surveillance company called FirstSwap, which sells location tracking software ostensibly to governments worldwide. And when I download it, I at first think this is just a bunch of testing data. Why would some company like this leave data relating to their activities just sitting on the internet? I'm looking at the phone numbers and there's country codes from countries all over the world. +31, the Netherlands, +55, Brazil, +971, the United Arab Emirates, +7, Russia. I see a +39 number. +39 is the country code of Italy. It's where my mom is from. I've spent a lot of time there over the years. And I decide to take this phone number and put it inside basically a search engine that allows me to see social media accounts that are attached to a phone number. When I drop it in there, I get a name back, Gianluigi Nuzzi. It's an Italian journalist, and this Italian journalist is famous for investigating corruption at the Vatican.
Epic financial mismanagement and corruption in the Vatican. Gianluigi Nuzzi is the author.
I take a look at the data and his phone number in there, and I see timestamps and dates. And the dates are May 2012. What was he doing in May of 2012? And I see that he was just days away from publishing his big expose, his big book about corruption in the Vatican.
I spent months placing telltale signs near the doors of my apartment in Rome because I feared that someone would break in and tamper with certain documents.
I think I felt like shitting my pants or something. These are real activities, real surveillance operations. Nearly every country in the world is represented inside this data set. On a single day, you can see individuals being tracked in Mongolia, Russia, Uganda, the United States. So pulling it apart and actually making sense of what it means felt like a gargantuan task. Pretty early on, we start looking at who are some of the individuals who are being tracked the most inside the data set. We see a +1 number in there. I'm interested in that because it's an American phone number, and I get an ID on that number, and it's Ann Wojcicki.
Ann Wojcicki.
Ann Wojcicki.
23andMe CEO and co-founder Ann Wojcicki.
Ann Wojcicki, co-founder of 23andMe, the genetics company, is this big figure in Silicon Valley. And at the time of being tracked, Ann is married to Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google.
Ann is tracked over 1,500 times as she moves around the San Francisco Bay Area over the course of these 2 weeks.
And we're gonna kind of go check out some of these locations.
It almost feels like you're walking in someone else's shoes for a little bit. There's something a bit eerie and disturbing about it, especially because we don't understand why Ann was being tracked. This seems to be about the straw. It seems like it was one of these stores here somewhere inside this building. Now we're gonna head over to Union Square where we see a couple different people being tracked down there. You have to keep in mind that this isn't just Ann Wojcicki who's being tracked, but also other Americans, including some employees at Google. I'm being reminded of that movie, that 70s movie, The Confrontation, right now. You can see the couple being monitored and listened to by Gene Hackman as they walk around Union Square. Definitely comes to mind. All right, let's keep walking. It's hard to know why someone would have wanted to track her movements, but what we do know is that the granularity of which her movements were being tracked is really exceptional, even compared to other targets in the database. We start putting other numbers inside our tool to sort of identify who they are, and we keep seeing other big names pop up. We see Asma al-Assad, the wife of Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator, the vice president of the United Arab Emirates and the owner of Manchester City. A whole manner of people who, in one way or another, are connected to power or the sort of operations of the state. Right before a pivotal election in Nigeria, there's a ton of tracking activity in the data set there. Right before protests in Thailand in 2010 and then again in 2014, there's a huge spike in surveillance traffic there. The surveillance tool isn't being used to track criminals and terrorists, which is what the company presents the tool as being intended to do. It's actually being used to track journalists and activists and big people in industry and heads of state. Inside the data, we oftentimes see clusters of people who are being tracked at the same time or tracked at the same locations. One of the clusters that emerged to us was a cluster of Rwandan dissidents who are living in exile in South Africa. In particular, Patrick Karegeya, a key figure in the Rwandan opposition movement. And what we see inside this data set is his bodyguard and other associates tracked not long before he was assassinated.
The tracking of Patrick Karegeya's associates with this first swap software ends months before his murder, and we don't know if it was still in place at the time of his death.
Nobody has ever come across a data set like this detailed. And so we sort of quickly understood that we as Lighthouse were not going to be able to tackle this ourselves. So we teamed up with Paper Trail Media and specifically the Obermeyers, two German journalists who were behind the Panama Papers investigation. And over time began adding newspapers, media partners, and other countries to help us make sense of this data set. We decided that we would embark on an undercover operation to try to see if the company would be willing to sell its software to a client that was going to use it for malicious purposes. We settled on the idea that we needed to meet this company in person at the ISS World, this premier trade fair for surveillance technology. But there were a bunch of problems and challenges that came with doing an operation like that. For one, this is a surveillance trade show. It's incredibly secretive. You cannot just walk in with a press pass. Secondly, how do we create a character for the company to talk to that'd be convincing enough for them that they would actually engage with and not shut down immediately? We spoke to one of our colleagues. His name is Emmanuel Freudenthal. He's an editor at Lighthouse. And we sort of created a character for him. Albert runs a sort of boutique, quote-unquote, research firm with an address in the British Virgin Islands. The idea was that Albert would go and approach this company with 3 scenarios and see if the company would be willing to sell to him. We're going in as undercover reporters to a surveillance fair. I mean, these are people whose job it is to find serious criminals. There's surveillance software all over the place. There was such a big risk that our reporter was identified in some way and that the entire operation would fall apart. We decided that in order to make our approach to the company more convincing, that we needed to get a second person involved. And so we brought in Mr. Abdu, who was going to act like he was a mover and shaker in Africa, connected to a number of West African governments who could only speak French. We went through some sort of training to understand how to use the hidden cameras in a way that wouldn't blow the cover of our undercover reporter, but we're still inside a surveillance fair. Mr. Abdu and our undercover reporter approached the company at a stand in the trade fair.
How are you?
I'm fine.
I've been talking with Evgeny and Winter.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say hi.
They will be here.
And told them that they wanted to have a meeting to discuss a potential sale. They demonstrated the tool on a laptop. They live tracked a number on it.
Telephone number to retrieve from the network where is the latest position of this specific subscriber.
Pretty early on, they pitched the scenario of a private mining company that wanted to track environmental activists protesting a mine, with the idea that these companies say that they only sell to government clients, not to private companies like a mining company.
A big hurdle, basically, they're having is basically people who are protesting around mining companies, against mining companies.
In the footage, you can see that Günter Rudolph, who's the executive they're talking to, is sort of presented with this scenario and asks them, do you want to know who the person leading the protests is? Or do you want to be able to track their movements?
To monitor those activists and check that they're not disrupting business, basically.
He knows already who are the leaders, or he wants to find out.
And it was at that moment that our undercover reporter and ourselves, when we saw the footage later, jaw dropped to the floor.
From Europe, from the US.
Here we see Günter Rudolph discussing the challenges of selling to sanctioned individuals as an Austrian citizen with an Austrian passport.
Which are under sanction and export limitations, where you're not allowed to deliver. And if you're just holding a German passport like Johnny, or an Austrian passport like me, I am not even allowed to know about the project, because otherwise I can go to prison.
He says he could go to prison if he went ahead with this deal, but he talks about a workaround. Doing the deal through Indonesia and having their Indian general manager sign all the paperwork.
We make it through Jakarta, and signature is coming from our Indian general manager, because we will never know about this project.
Right, okay.
There's this conversation, should we stop, quit while we're ahead, but decide that we want to get even more. And so we go back on day 2 and we approach the executives at the booth and we tell them, we have a client who wants to be able to track someone on the sanctions list, and what he wants to use that software for is to track people in the United States who put him on that sanctions list.
So you were saying yesterday that if there's someone who's on the sanctions, then he can do the contracting through Indonesia.
The problem is the export license, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for this we can find a way.
Okay.
Für Lieferung nach Niger. Niger. Ist auf der sanction list.
And the executives don't walk away. Instead, they look directly at our undercover reporter and present a plan for how they'd be able to sell to sanctioned individuals.
The permission to resell the system to one law enforcement agency in Africa.
Yeah.
It happens to be in Nigeria, okay, we don't know.
We don't know, then it's okay.
At least it's not in the documentation. And if the money comes then from you to us, because if it comes from Nigeria then to our Dubai anyway, they immediately block our bank accounts.
Yeah.
So then maybe we can find a way to work around this.
Yeah.
Everyone is sort of shocked that they would actually agree to do something like that. They're offering to break sanctions.
As you know, right?
You have a risk from South Africa to...
But I'm French, right? So, yeah.
Germany is Austrian.
Yeah, so exactly.
We return back to the hotel room, sort of in a state of disbelief. It was extraordinary, and what the company was willing to do and what we were able to capture on camera went way beyond expectations. It's incredibly hard to protect yourself from this location tracking surveillance. This is a story, of course, about the companies that are developing surveillance software and marketing it around the world. But the weaknesses that these companies are exploiting are things that can be fixed. Telecom networks and providers then can do a better job of securing their networks in a way that prevents these companies from tracking people around the world. It's a story of the companies actively developing these software, but it's also the story of governments and technology companies that are failing to properly protect their users. If one of these companies decides to track your phone, as an individual, there's nothing you can do besides turning your phone off. If your phone is on and connected to a telephone network, you're fair game.
I think we can all agree we found a good way around the sanctions But I have to admit, I'm actually working for a coalition of investigative journalists. And so I was wondering, why did you agree to do a deal with a sanctioned client when you said yourself that you could go to prison for that?